"Sir, step away from the bench." The shout cracked through the morning air like thunder splitting glass. Every jogger stopped. Every phone lifted. And in the center of that still park, a man in a gray vest slowly looked up from his coffee. "Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to Malcolm Reed. He didn't look like trouble, at least not the kind they imagined. Crisp shirt, silk tie, no badge in sight. Just calm. Too calm. And for some officers, calm is defiance. Two patrolmen advanced, hands near their belts. "Id," one barked. Malcolm blinked once. "For what reason, officer?" "Suspicious behavior," the taller one said. "You've been sitting here too long." He looked at the open folder on his lap, a briefing stamped classified. He closed it, slowly, carefully, like sealing a secret the world wasn't ready for. "I'm enjoying the weather," he replied. "Is that a crime today?" The younger cop scoffed. "Depends who's enjoying it." The line dropped like a match in dry grass. People began recording. Someone whispered, "He didn't do anything." Another voice, "Typical. Same park, different day." A mother pulled her son closer. A dog barked once, as if sensing the shift. The calm morning started to hum with tension. One officer circled behind him. "Hands where we can see them." Malcolm exhaled, his breath steady, measured like a man counting seconds before a verdict. "Do you always approach readers this way?" he asked. "Or just the black ones?" "Don't make this about race," the cop snapped. "We're just doing our job." "Are you?" Malcolm's tone never rose. "Or are you doing what you were taught to fear?" The taller one's jaw tightened. "Stand up." He didn't. He just looked past them to the pond, to the crowd, to the sky that had seen this scene too many times before. Somewhere in that silence, memory stirred. He was 19 once, pinned against a car hood outside a library, told the same words, "You don't belong here." 26 years later, the line hadn't aged a day. He stood, not because they ordered him, but because dignity demanded it. The badge beneath his vest pressed cold against his chest, waiting for the moment silence would end. One officer muttered, "If he moves again, cuff him." Another hissed, "Man, he's not even resisting." The leader glared, "We'll see about that." And then, from somewhere behind the phone screens and whispers, a woman said what everyone felt: they picked the wrong man. The camera light reflected off his watch, then off the small black leather case in his hand. The case every officer would soon regret not recognizing. The air froze, the hum stopped, and justice, quiet and patient, took its first breath. The morning crowd thickened. Joggers slowed, phones raised higher, whispers turning into a soft hum of tension. Malcolm stood perfectly still, calm posture, hands visible, eyes unwavering. The taller cop took a step closer, the kind that blurs authority with ego. "What's in the folder, sir?" "Documents," Malcolm replied. "Federal work." "Federal, huh?" The cop smirked. "Everyone says that when they're lying." He reached for the folder. Malcolm's voice sliced through the space, quiet but firm. "You don't have clearance to touch that." The younger officer laughed. "Clearance? You think you're in some kind of movie?" The crowd caught that line. A few murmured, "This is gonna blow up." A teenage girl whispered to her friend, "He's not even arguing. Why are they pushing him?" The taller cop's radio buzzed. Static crackled, then silence. He ignored it. "Last chance, ID now." Malcolm tilted his head, studying the man like a case file. "You're escalating a situation that doesn't exist," he said softly. "Why?" "Because you look out of place." The words hung in the air like smoke. Someone in the crowd said what everyone thought. "So it is about race." The cop spun around. "Put that phone down." But no one did. In 2025, cameras don't blink, they testify. Malcolm sighed, adjusting his cufflinks. "I see," he murmured. "Policy by prejudice." He glanced at the younger officer, who now looked uneasy. "You don't have to follow him into this." "He's my sergeant," the young man muttered. "And I'm your mirror," Malcolm replied. "You'll see what kind of man you really serve." The sergeant scoffed. "Don't get philosophical. You're the one in cuffs." He motioned to grab Malcolm's wrist. Malcolm didn't resist. He simply looked over the sergeant's shoulder and said, "If you're detaining me, record the reason. You'll need it later." Click. The sound of metal meeting skin. Cameras zoomed in. The crowd murmured louder. A child's voice broke through. "Mom, why are they arresting him?" The mother didn't answer. She just whispered, Watch closely. A young black park ranger, 24 maybe, stepped from behind a kiosk, nervous but resolute. "Sir," she said to the officers, "I saw him arrive. He's done nothing wrong." The sergeant glared. "This doesn't concern you." "It does now," she said. "You're detaining a citizen without probable cause." For the first time, the crowd clapped not loud, but enough to shift the balance. The sergeant turned red. "Everyone thinks they're a lawyer now." Malcolm met his eyes. "No, they just remember the law you forgot." The ranger stood her ground. "You're on camera, officer." He shot back. "Then you'd better film my good side." She didn't move, didn't blink. That'll be hard from a courtroom. The silence that followed felt like judgment. Malcolm looked down at the cuffs, stainless steel, biting into the sleeve of a $3,000 suit. His voice dropped, low and deliberate. "You've made two mistakes today. The first was assuming silence means weakness." He lifted his eyes, sharp as glass. "The second was putting those cuffs on the wrong man." The sergeant sneered. "Oh yeah? And who exactly are you?" Malcolm's lips curved into something between pity and promise. "You'll find out before lunch." A ripple moved through the crowd. The ranger whispered, almost in awe, "Who is he?" Malcolm straightened his back, the badge beneath his vest pressing cold against his chest again, waiting for its moment. The cameras kept rolling. Justice wasn't trending yet, but it was coming. The sound of metal scraping bark cut through the park as the sergeant yanked Malcolm toward a nearby oak. The cuffs glinted under the noon light, too bright, too deliberate. Somewhere behind the circle of bystanders, someone said quietly, "He's not resisting. Why are they still pushing?" Malcolm steadied himself, back straight despite the pull. "You sure you want to keep this going?" he asked evenly. "You bet," the sergeant spat. "You people always play victim when caught." Malcolm's brow lifted slightly. "Define caught." A ripple of discomfort passed through the younger cop's face. He'd heard that tone before, calm, surgical, the kind that belonged to someone who didn't bluff. The sergeant grabbed the folder from the bench and held it up like evidence. "Let's see what's inside, huh?" Malcolm's voice didn't rise, but the park seemed to hold its breath. "You open that, you commit a federal offense." The officer scoffed. "You think I care about your made-up laws?" He tore it open. Inside embossed letterhead, the kind that carries weight heavier than paper. At the top, a gold seal, Federal Bureau of Investigation. The crowd gasped. The young officer froze. "Sarge, that's real." "No, it's a prop. Has to be." The sergeant's voice cracked mid-sentence. Malcolm turned toward him, cuffs still tight around his wrists. "You're right about one thing," he said softly. "It has to be real." The ranger stepped closer, her phone filming steadily. "Sir, maybe you should—" "No," Malcolm interrupted gently. "Let them finish writing their own report." "Huh?" The sergeant's face reddened. "Enough with the games. Who are you?" Malcolm looked past him to the growing crowd, students, joggers, parents, all watching the small theater of power unravel. "I'm the reason your captain's phone is about to ring." As if on cue, the sergeant's radio crackled. "Unit 3, Charlie, stand down. Repeat, stand down immediately." The sergeant blinked. "What?" "Command says release the subject now." The crowd murmured. Someone whispered, "Oh, he's really someone." Ugh. Malcolm exhaled slowly, letting the moment stretch. "That's your call, not mine," he said. The younger cop stepped forward, voice barely above a whisper. "Sir, I think we made a mistake." Malcolm met his eyes, not angry, just tired. "No, you made a pattern." He extended his cuffed wrists. The younger cop hesitated, then unlocked them. The metal clicked open, softer than regret. Malcolm rubbed his wrist once, then reached into his inner pocket. Out came the small black case. When it opened, sunlight caught the gold shield like truth catching up to a lie. The inscription gleamed clear. "Director, Federal Bureau of Investigation." A collective inhale swept the park. The ranger's phone trembled slightly in her hand. The sergeant took a step back, face draining color. "Director Reed, we had no idea." "Exactly," Malcolm said. "You didn't ask. You just assumed." The words landed heavier than the badge. Behind them, the younger officer's voice cracked. "Sir, Save it," Malcolm cut in. "Just remember what it feels like to be wrong in public." He turned to the ranger. "Thank you for speaking up. That's how change starts, one voice before the crowd joins." She nodded, almost stunned. "Sir, should I call this in?" "Already handled." He tapped his earpiece. "Internal Affairs has the footage. They'll sort out the rest." The sergeant stood frozen, mouth open, No words left that could undo the scene. Malcolm adjusted his cuffs back into place, the small mark on his wrist already fading. "Justice doesn't shout," he said quietly. "It just arrives late, but it arrives." He looked around the park, the witnesses, the phones, the silence that now felt different. It wasn't the quiet of fear anymore. It was respect learning how to breathe. No one moved. For a full heartbeat, the park seemed frozen in amber, the birds, the wind, even the fountain's rhythm paused as if reverence had replaced motion. Then the murmurs began. One voice near the benches said, "He's the FBI director." Another, shaky with adrenaline, answered, "They really cuffed the FBI director in broad daylight." Phones lifted higher. Cameras zoomed in. The algorithm of outrage had found its next chapter. Malcolm stood where he was, not triumphant, not smiling, just still, the kind of stillness that makes guilt echo louder. The sergeant tried to recompose himself, brushing off invisible dust as if that could erase what had just happened. "Sir, if we'd known—" "But you didn't," Malcolm interrupted, voice steady as steel under calm water. "That's the point." He turned slightly so his words carried to the onlookers too. "Profiling always starts the same way, certainty before evidence." The young ranger nodded quietly, recording every word. A child's voice whispered again, "Mom, is he mad at them?" The mother answered softly, "No, he's teaching them." The sergeant cleared his throat, desperate to regain command. "Director Reed, I take full responsibility. We'll write up the report." Malcolm glanced at him, then at the badge on his chest. "You'll do more than write. You'll remember." He reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. The screen flashed blue encrypted interface, Federal Network. "This is Reed, Riverside Park, 9:47. Initiate internal audit on all field units present." A crisp voice replied through his earpiece. "Understood, Director, logging incident now." The officers shifted uneasily. The young one whispered, "That's a real line, isn't it?" Malcolm didn't answer. He didn't need to. The confirmation tone from his phone said enough. The crowd around him wasn't quiet anymore, it was listening. An elderly man near the fountain spoke up, voice rough but clear. "I served 30 years in law enforcement," he said. "We were trained to read the scene, not the skin." A few heads turned. A few nodded. The sergeant looked like he wanted the ground to open. Malcolm met the veteran's eyes. "Then you know what went wrong here." "Yes, sir," the man said. "They forgot who they swore to protect." Someone in the crowd clapped once, awkward, hesitant, then another. Soon the park filled with the soft percussion of palms meeting conviction. Malcolm didn't bask in it. He raised a hand gently, signaling for quiet. "Don't cheer for me," he said. "Cheer for the ranger who spoke up, for the man who remembered his oath, for every camera that refused to blink." The ranger's eyes glistened. "Sir, people will see this everywhere." "Good," he said. "Sunlight's the best reform agent we have." The sergeant swallowed hard. "What happens to us now?" Malcolm regarded him for a moment, not cruelly, but with the weary patience of someone who's seen too many repeats of the same script. "You'll go back to the station, file your report, and tell the truth, word for word." He leaned closer. "And when Internal Affairs calls, don't lie. They already have the footage." The younger officer nodded mutely, shame tightening his throat. "Director Reed, I'm sorry." Malcolm studied him, then gave a single nod. "Make the apology mean something next time." He turned to the crowd once more. "For those filming," he said, "keep the videos, post them. Not for me, for every man or woman who doesn't have a badge strong enough to end it this way." Silence again. This time, not of fear of reflection. A breeze moved through the trees, scattering light across the grass. The ranger lowered her phone. "What will you do now, sir?" Malcolm glanced at the open sky, then back to her. "Same thing I've always done," he said. "Investigate what people call justice and find out who it really serves." And as he walked away, the crowd parted for him. No applause, no shouting, just the sound of phones lowering, heads bowing slightly. The park, once a stage for humiliation, had turned into a classroom. And in that quiet, justice patient, calm, unshaken, finally took its seat. By noon, the park had emptied, but the story hadn't. Clips were already flooding every platform, short, shaky, and furious. FBI director detained for sitting in a park. Racial profiling caught live. Justice walks in a gray vest. The captions varied, but the message didn't. Malcolm sat alone in the back of a black SUV, the same calm posture, but his eyes were elsewhere, scanning headlines reflected in the tinted glass. The driver, Agent Ramirez, glanced through the mirror. "Sir, the Bureau's PR line is already calling." You want me to connect you? No, Malcolm said. Let them breathe. Let people see it raw. He turned his wrist, the red mark from the cuffs faint but visible. Sometimes, he murmured, the truth needs a bruise to get noticed. The car rolled past the edge of Riverside Park. News vans had already gathered like vultures that smelled reform. Reporters shouted questions. Director Reed, is it true you were arrested? Are the officers suspended? Will you press charges? He didn't answer. Not yet. Silence, in his hands, was still strategy. Inside the bureau headquarters, phones rang non-stop. Screens flashed the clip from every angle, zoomed, looped, analyzed. Deputy Director Nia Carter paced the operations floor. They're calling it the loitering incident, she said. It's already hit 3 million views. Good, Malcolm's voice came through the line. Let the numbers work for us this time. You sure about that, sir? This kind of exposure? Nia, this isn't exposure, it's evidence. She exhaled, nodded to no one in particular. Yes, Director. In the SUV, Malcolm's phone buzzed again. A message flashed. Internal audit initiated. Officers placed on leave pending investigation. He allowed himself one slow blink, not satisfaction, just confirmation. Fast work, he said. Ramirez smiled faintly. You trained them. Malcolm looked out the window. A child was sitting on the same bench he'd been cuffed beside, licking ice cream, laughing. The bench looked smaller now. Funny, he said quietly. A place can forgive faster than people. Ramirez frowned. You could have told them who you were sooner. I could have, Malcolm replied, but then the lesson would have ended before it began. He reached into his briefcase, pulling out the torn folder from the park. The seal was still intact, the crease down the middle like a scar. Inside, not just reports, memos on systemic bias in federal partnerships, racial equity audits, law enforcement culture reform. He'd been reviewing those exact documents when the officers approached him. The irony was almost poetic. Sir, Ramirez said quietly, the president's office just requested a statement. Malcolm stared at the papers. Tell them this wasn't a scandal, he said. It was a mirror. Ramirez nodded, typing. Anything else? Malcolm folded the documents back into the folder, tapping it once with his finger. File a request, he said. I want those officers reassigned to community training with pay suspended until completion. No headlines, no revenge, just reform. The driver hesitated. You're giving them a second chance? Malcolm looked at his reflection in the glass. Eyes steady, voice low. I'm giving the system one. The SUV stopped at a red light. On the sidewalk, two teenagers were replaying the video on their phones, nodding to the beat of justice made viral. One of them said, Man, that dude didn't even raise his voice. The other answered, Yeah, he didn't have to. Malcolm heard it through the open window. A small, fleeting smile crossed his face. Not pride, just peace. Let's head back, he said softly. We've got a lot of rebuilding to do. As the car pulled away, the wind carried the echoes of the morning. A shout, a silence, a revelation. 3 acts. One truth dignity doesn't need permission to exist. And as the park disappeared in the mirror, the story wasn't ending. It was just beginning to make sense. By evening, the clip had grown leg. It walked through newsrooms, classrooms, dinner tables. Hashtags marched across every screen. Number Riverside Park. Number Justice in Gray. Number Silent Power. The story wasn't just about one man in cuffs anymore. It had turned into a question that made everyone uncomfortable. How many times had it happened without a camera? Inside the Hoover building, the night shift buzzed with tension. Agents whispered in corridors, not from fear, from recognition. Every TV in the lobby played the same loop. Malcolm Reed standing calm, cuffs glinting, voice steady. No anger, no shouting. Just truth delivered like a verdict. Deputy Director Nia Carter entered his office, tablet in hand. Sir, the Attorney General just called. They're forming a review committee for use of force protocols. Malcolm didn't look up from his laptop. Good. Make sure they start with the definition of force. She frowned. You mean physical? No, he said, eyes still on the screen. Assumptive. The kind that begins before you even open your mouth. Nia hesitated. They're calling it the Reed incident. You okay with that? Malcolm leaned back in his chair. If it makes people talk, I can live with the name. Outside the glass wall of his office, the city pulsed with its nightly rhythm, distant sirens, neon reflections, lives intersecting in ways the headlines would never see. He turned the laptop around to show her a paused frame, the sergeant's hand gripping his arm, the ranger standing firm beside him, the crowd behind. "Freeze it here," he said. "That's not a scandal. That's a syllabus." Nia smiled faintly. "You're planning to use it for training, aren't you?" "Not planning," he said. "Implementing. Tomorrow." He stood, crossed to the window. The faint bruise on his wrist had darkened slightly, a mark not of weakness, but of evidence. "Pain has to go somewhere," he said quietly. "Might as well send it to the classroom." Nia nodded. "I'll draft the memo." She turned to leave, but Malcolm stopped her. "And Nia," Hay said, "no edits, no sanitizing. Let them see every second the cuffs, the crowd, the silence. That's the part that teaches." "Understood." When she left, the room returned to its heavy quiet. Malcolm's phone vibrated again, a text from an unknown number. "You didn't deserve that, neither do we. Officer J.L." He read it twice, then locked the screen. "Maybe the system's not dead yet," he murmured. Moments later, his desk intercom buzzed. "Director, CNN's live segment is asking for comment. Do you want to join remotely?" "No," he said. "Let them keep guessing. Silence still works faster than sound." He walked toward the shelf behind his desk rows of framed commendations, none of them for what mattered most. He picked up one photo, his father in uniform, 1978, smiling beside a patrol car. The inscription at the bottom read, "Serve with honor, not ego." Malcolm traced the edge of the frame with his thumb. "You tried to fix it from inside," he whispered. "Now it's my turn." His phone buzzed again this time, an alert from the Bureau network. "Officer suspension confirmed. Public statement draft pending." He exhaled, eyes closing briefly. "No suspension will fix this," he said to the empty room. "Only understanding will." He opened a blank document, typing slowly, each word deliberate. "Memo. Initiative on perception. Based policing. Objective to retrain sight before reaction." Outside, thunder rolled across the city, not violent, just certain. The same sound that had started it all that morning. But this time, it didn't signal confrontation. It sounded like change clearing its throat. Morning sunlight poured through the Bureau's glass atrium like a new verdict. Every monitor on the 9th floor displayed the same paused frame, the cuffs, the bench, the calm. The file name at the bottom corner read, Riverside Park Incident Training Version 1. Agents in suits filled the auditorium, restless, whispering. Some looked uneasy, others looked ashamed. At the front stood Deputy Director Nia Carter, tablet in hand. "You've all seen this clip online," she said. "Now you're going to see what the director saw." The lights dimmed. The video began. The first minute played in silence, no narration, no edits, just the raw encounter, the shout, the cuffs, the badge. When it ended, Nia didn't speak right away. Neither did anyone else. You could hear the air conditioning hum like a nervous breath. "Finally," she said, "that man you're watching didn't lose control. The officers did. And they didn't do it because of what he did. They did it because of what they saw." She tapped the screen. Statistics filled the wall data on bias response times, perception errors, use of force escalation. "This isn't about bad apples, it's about bad wiring," she said, "and that's what we're going to retrain." From the back row, an older agent raised his hand. "Ma'am, I've been in law enforcement 30 years. People get tense. Things happen. You can't teach instinct." Nia turned toward him. "You can teach what builds instinct," she replied, "and you can rebuild it when it's wrong." A quiet ripple of agreement moved through the room. At that moment, Malcolm entered through the side door. No announcement, no escort. Just presence. The chatter died instantly. He walked up to the front, nodding once to Nia. "Continue," he said. "They've just seen the uncut footage," she replied. Malcolm faced the agents. "Good. Now tell me what you saw." A younger agent spoke first. "I saw a man get profiled." Another added, "I saw fear pretending to be procedure." A third whispered, "I saw myself. Maybe." Malcolm's expression didn't change. "That's a start," he said. He stepped closer to the screen, froze the image where the sergeant's hand gripped his arm. "This," he said, tapping the frame, "is what assumption looks like. The moment truth stops mattering and bias starts writing policy." He turned back to them. "We wear badges that say justice, but too often we act like we own it. Justice isn't possession, it's responsibility." Nia watched him proud, uneasy, knowing the weight those words carried. Malcolm continued, his tone low, deliberate. "Every officer involved in Riverside will enter this training first, not as punishment, as precedence. They'll help us build the curriculum. A murmur of surprise rippled through the room. You're keeping them? Someone asked. I'm keeping accountability where it belongs, Malcolm replied. Inside the system, not outside of it. He closed the file, the screen going black. This isn't a campaign, he said. It's a correction. The agents stood, some clapping, others silent, all processing. Malcolm raised a hand. Don't applaud, he said. Just apply. As they filed out, a few stopped to shake his hand. One agent, Latina, early 30 seconds, said quietly, Sir, my brother was stopped last year. Same words, same tone. He didn't have your badge. Malcolm met her gaze. That's why I had to use mine. When the room finally cleared, Nia exhaled. That's how you wanted to start the program? No, Malcolm said, watching the sunlight climb the glass wall. That's how I wanted to start the change. Outside, cameras still waited, hungry for a statement. Inside, reform had already begun, not as a press release, but as a reckoning. Justice, for once, wasn't trending. It was training. The day after the training, Washington felt different. Not louder, just more awake. The clip had crossed from social feeds to the Senate floor. What started as a viral moment was now a policy conversation. By noon, Malcolm's calendar filled with urgent meetings. Civil rights groups wanted collaboration. Police unions wanted damage control. And somewhere in between, truth waited to see who would claim it first. At 2 p.m., his assistant's voice came through the intercom. Director Reed, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, is on line 1. Malcolm paused, then answered. Chairman Holt, good afternoon. Director, you've caused quite a storm here, Holt said. Half the chamber wants to condemn the officers. The other half wants to question your conduct. Malcolm smiled faintly. Sounds balanced to me. They're asking whether this was orchestrated. If it were, I'd have picked a better park. There was silence, then a low chuckle. You know how this town works, Reed. Everyone wants a villain. Then they'll be disappointed. I only deal in facts. Holt sighed. We're scheduling a public hearing next week. You'll be invited to testify. Invited or summoned? Let's call it both. When the call ended, Malcolm leaned back in his chair. Across the office, Nia was already reading the headlines. Congress demands FBI director explain park arrest. Was it justice or optics? America divided over silence. They're coming for you from both sides, she said. Good, Malcolm replied. That means I'm standing in the middle. He closed his laptop and walked toward the window. The D.C. skyline shimmered in heat, the Capitol dome sharp against the sky. You ever notice, he said, how people think justice is a room they can walk into? It's not. It's a mirror they keep avoiding. Nia frowned. You think the hearing's a trap? No, he said. It's theater, but sometimes theater changes law. The next day, he stood before a panel of 12 senators under the harsh white lights of the committee room. Cameras flashed. Reporters whispered. On the big screen behind him, the Riverside Park clip froze on the image of the handcuffs. Director Reed, the chairman began, some believe you provoked the officers by withholding your identity. Was that wise? Malcolm's voice was even. Withholding my identity isn't provocation. It's privacy, and it's a right. Every citizen has badge or not. A senator leaned forward. You could have de-escalated sooner. So could they, Malcolm replied. The room stirred. Another senator, older, skeptical. You're suggesting this incident reveals systemic bias? I'm not suggesting, Malcolm said. I'm documenting. He tapped the folder in front of him, the same one torn open at the park. These are internal reports. 241 similar cases in 5 years. Most never recorded. This one was by accident and by history. The chairman adjusted his glasses. And what do you expect us to do with that? Malcolm's tone softened, almost weary. Stop pretending it's new. A ripple of silence passed through the room. The chairman finally said, Director Reed, if you could change one thing about law enforcement today, what would it be? Malcolm thought for a moment. I'd retrain perception before procedure, because no policy survives a poisoned instinct. The room went still. Even the cameras seemed to pause between frames. Someone from the press gallery whispered, That's the quote. When the session ended, reporters swarmed him, shouting questions. Malcolm said nothing, only turned once toward the cameras and offered a single line. If you want justice, start by unlearning comfort. By the next morning, those words were everywhere, printed, posted, painted on signs outside the bureau gates. Some agreed, some mocked, but the silence he'd used to teach the park was now echoing through the nation's halls of power. And for the first time in years, It sounded like progress. It didn't take long for the silence to get loud. By dawn, the headlines had split in two like fault lines across the country. FBI director turns hearing into sermon. Reed's words go viral again. Law enforcement divided over retrain perception plan. Talk shows replayed the clip on loop, pausing right before his line. No policy survives a poisoned instinct. Some called it genius. Others called it dangerous. Malcolm's phone buzzed it nonstop. Messages stacked like verdicts. We stand with you. You embarrass the badge. Keep talking. Stay silent. He read none of them. Instead, he walked through the Bureau's west corridor, where portraits of past directors hung 12 men, all white, all staring forward like judges of another era. He stopped halfway down. The reflection of his face hovered among theirs, not blending, not erased, just new. Behind him, Nia caught up, breath short from the flood of morning chaos. Sir, you're trending again. 2 million mentions in an hour. Then people are listening, he said. Some are shouting. That's what listening sounds like before it learns. She hesitated, then handed him a printed memo. Law enforcement unions are pushing back. They're saying your comments undermined officer morale. Malcolm scanned the first few lines. Morale built on denial collapses on truth, he murmured. He handed the memo back. Schedule a roundtable. Union leaders, civil rights advocates, and local chiefs. All of them in one room. That's going to be volatile. Exactly, he said. Fire forges change. Later that afternoon, the conference room at Bureau HQ filled with uniforms and tension. Batches gleamed on fluorescent lights. Coffee cups shook slightly in unsteady hands. A police chief from Dallas spoke first. With all due respect, Director, your words make every officer out there look like a bigot. Malcolm leaned forward, elbows on the table. If the words fit everyone, maybe the problem does too. The man stiffened. We risk our lives daily. You made us the villains. No, Malcolm said. I showed the script. You can still rewrite it. A woman from the Civil Rights Coalition chimed in. Director Reed, the public's divided. How do you plan to fix a perception that deep? You don't fix perception, he replied. You confront it. The room quieted. Nia watched from the corner, noting every reaction, anger, guilt, confusion. Malcolm continued, tone steady as a gavel. If justice feels like an accusation, that says more about you than the law. One union head slammed a palm on the table. You're turning this into philosophy, not policy. Malcolm's gaze didn't waver. Policy built without philosophy is procedure without purpose. The words hung like smoke. No one coughed, but everyone inhaled. From the back of the room, a young precinct captain finally spoke up. Sir, I saw that video. I've done the same thing. Not proud of it. The room shifted. What did you do afterward? Malcolm asked. Watched it again, the man said quietly. This time with shame. Then that's where reform begins, Malcolm replied. Not in legislation and recognition. Oh. For a long moment, the only sound was the hum of the air vents and the faint shuffle of moral discomfort. When the meeting adjourned, Nia walked beside him down the hall. You keep talking like this, she said. They'll call you political. They already do, he said. But I'm not running for office, I'm running out of patience. They stopped by the elevator. Nia looked at him, concern and admiration colliding in her eyes. Do you ever get tired of fighting everyone at once? Malcolm pressed the button, eyes fixed on the mirrored doors, only when they start agreeing for the wrong reasons. The doors opened. He stepped in. The reflection swallowed him whole, one man between two worlds, law and justice, order and truth. Outside, protesters had started to gather. Some held signs calling for his resignation. Others carried banners reading, "Teach what he taught." And as the chants clashed in the distance, Malcolm whispered to himself, almost prayer-like, reform was never meant to be comfortable. It was meant to be complete. Night fell over Washington like a verdict. The streets glowed in red and blue, reflections, protest lights flickering against marble. Outside the Hoover building, two crowds faced each other across a single barricade, one chanting, "Resign," the other shouting, "Respect." But inside, on the top floor, Malcolm Reed stood at his window, silent, unshaken. The chants below blurred into a single hum, like the heartbeat of a nation arguing with itself. He pressed his palm against the glass and whispered, "Let them talk. Talking is a beginning." Behind him, Nia entered, tablet in hand, her face pale from the glow of breaking news. "Sir, the president just called. He's asking for a statement by morning." "About the protests?" "About you?" Malcolm turned. "And what does he want to hear?" "That you're sorry. that this wasn't political, that you respect the chain of command. A long silence filled the room. I respect the truth, Malcolm said finally. Chains have never taught anyone to see. Nia set the tablet down. You're walking a line most people won't forgive. Then they'll learn something new: forgiveness. He looked at the folder still sitting on his desk, the same one from Riverside Park, now smoothed and relabeled. On the cover, training module, the cost of assumption. You know what I realized, Nia? He said quietly. Power isn't about who obeys you, it's about who learns from you. She hesitated. You think they're learning? He gave a faint smile. They're resisting. That's the first sign of learning. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere beyond the Potomac. The protests grew louder. Helicopter lights swept across the windows like searchlights of accountability. Malcolm walked to his desk, unlocked the top drawer, and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside his FBI badge, slightly dented from the day it hit the pavement in Riverside. He turned it over in his hand, the metal cool and familiar. Every symbol breaks before it means something, he murmured. You thinking of stepping down? Nia asked quietly. No, he said. I'm thinking of stepping deeper. She frowned. What do you mean? If they want silence, he said, I'll make it echo. He sat, opened his laptop, and began typing his public statement. Not a defense, not an apology, but a declaration. To those who see this as rebellion, know this. Justice doesn't fit into comfort zones. It expands by collision. I didn't create the noise. I exposed the quiet. He paused, reading it back aloud, each word deliberate, grounded, weighty. Send that to the press at dawn, he told Nia. They'll call it arrogance. Then they'll spell it right, he replied. He stood, walked toward the window again. The barricades below were now dotted with rain, blurring slogans into streaks of red and white rage, and hope melting into one. A protester's voice carried faintly through a megaphone. We need change, not speeches. Malcolm's eyes softened. Then they'll need both, he whispered. He turned off the lights. Only the city illuminated his outline, a silhouette of resolve, framed by rebellion. Nia lingered at the door, watching him. You really believe one story can change how people see? Malcolm glanced over his shoulder. It already did. They're arguing about it. Down below, the first drops of rain turned into a storm. Posters soaked, chants drowned, but the energy stayed. It wasn't anger anymore. It was momentum. And as thunder rolled across the Capitol, Malcolm Reed, the man once cuffed for sitting in a park, stood quietly in the highest office of law enforcement, not shouting, not retreating, but holding steady in the storm he'd chosen to start. Because some revolutions don't begin with fire. They begin with restraint. The next morning, Washington woke to rain and reckoning. The president's press secretary read Malcolm Reed's statement live on every network. By noon, half the country was quoting it. The other half was dissecting it like evidence in a courtroom. But inside the bureau, it wasn't the public noise that mattered. It was the silence, the kind that filled corridors before something historic shifts. Agents walked faster. Conversations lowered. A few nodded to Malcolm as he passed. Most didn't. Respect and resentment now shared the same hallway. He stepped into the Situation Room, a dozen monitors flickering with live feeds, protests from 6 states, commentary from every outlet. Deputy Director Nia Carter was already there, headset on, managing the incoming chaos. Sir, she said, turning to him, we're getting threats from inside the ranks. Some agents are calling your reform plan an overreach. Malcolm nodded slowly. Good. Change never knocks politely. He set his briefcase on the table. What about the training rollout? It's ready, but 3 regional offices are refusing to implement it. Refusing? He repeated. Or delaying? They're saying morale's too low to begin. Malcolm sighed. Then morale is exactly where reform begins. He opened the briefcase, pulling out a single document, a transfer order. Effective immediately, he said, sliding it across the table. I'll conduct the first training myself. Nia blinked. Sir, you're going into field offices personally? Yes, Malcolm said. If I can be cuffed in public, I can teach in person. Word spread fast. By evening, every internal chat channel buzzed with disbelief. The director's coming here? He's serious? He's risking his life for optics. But Malcolm didn't care about optics. He cared about outcome. 2 days later, he landed in Georgia, an old field division known for discipline and quiet compliance. Rain still followed him, heavy, cinematic, as if the weather itself had joined his story. When he entered the briefing room, 40 agents stood waiting. Some defiant, some defensive, all curious. He placed his badge on the podium, the same one dented at Riverside. "You already know who I am," he began. "So let's talk about who we are." No PowerPoint, no slogans. Just a man with a mark on his wrist and a mirror for every soul in the room. "Law enforcement isn't failing because we lack rules," he said. "It's failing because we lack reflection." A murmur spread. One agent raised his hand. "Sir, with respect, you made us look weak in front of the country." Malcolm nodded. "No. I made the truth visible. Weakness hides. Accountability doesn't." Another agent spoke up, younger, hesitant. "But people don't trust us anymore. What do we do with that?" Malcolm's guz is softened. "Earn it back, one encounter at a time. Same way I had to." He walked to the window, rain streaking the glass behind him like old headlines fading. "We talk about serving justice," he said quietly, "but we forget justice is supposed to serve us too by reminding us who we're meant to be." For a moment, no one spoke. Even the storm outside seemed to listen. Then, from the back of the room, a voice broke the silence. "Sir, I saw that video. My father was arrested the same way when I was a kid. I joined the bureau to stop that." Out. Malcolm turned toward the agent. "Then start today," he said. "Every change starts with one person who refuses to inherit someone else's blindness." When the session ended, something had shifted, not applause, not agreement, but awareness. And in the quiet after the storm, Malcolm slipped the badge back into his pocket. Nia called as he stepped outside into the rain. "How did it go?" "Better than headlines will admit," he said. "You think they'll follow your lead?" "They don't have to," Malcolm replied. "They just have to think." Lightning cracked across the gray horizon, reflecting in the wet asphalt like a pulse. He looked up, letting the rain hit his face. For the first time in weeks, it didn't feel like weight. It felt like witness. A month later, Riverside Park was quiet again. No cameras, no chants, no storm, just the steady rhythm of footsteps, laughter, and the familiar hum of ordinary life returning unaware it was walking through the scene of a lesson that had changed a nation. A bronze plaque now sat beside the old oak tree. In this place, silence spoke louder than anger. Justice listened. No signature, no title, just truth. Malcolm Reed stood there in the early morning light, the same gray vest, the same composure. A jogger passed and did a double take. "You're him, aren't you? The guy from—" "Just someone enjoying the park," Malcolm said with a faint smile. He sat on the same bench where it all began, sipping coffee, watching the city wake. Birds landed where the cuffs once clinked. Children ran where fear once froze the air. For a moment, he closed his eyes, replaying the sounds, the shout, the phones, the words. "You don't belong here." He breathed in the peace that had replaced them. A familiar voice approached from behind. "Sir?" It was the young park ranger, the one who'd spoken up that day. She stood taller now, wearing a new badge that gleamed in the Sunday. "I didn't think I'd see you here again." "I never left," he said softly, "just moved higher up the map." She smiled. "They renamed the training after you. Every new recruit starts with the Reed module." "That wasn't the goal," he replied. "Maybe not," she said, "but it became the standard." They stood in silence, watching the reflection of the city ripple across the pond. Then she asked, "Do you ever regret not revealing who you were sooner?" Malcolm shook his head. "If I had," he said, "it would have been another arrest that ended quietly." This way, it began loudly and ended with listening. From the distance, a man in uniform approached the young officer from that day. He looked nervous but resolute. "Director Reed," he said, voice trembling, "I came to thank you." Malcolm studied him for a long second. "For what?" "For not ending my career. For giving me training instead of punishment." "Training was punishment," Malcolm replied, half smiling. "But you passed." The officer nodded. "I teach the module now. I tell them what I saw in your eyes that day." "And what was that?" "Calm I mistook for weakness." Malcolm placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then you've learned the hardest lesson." The young man swallowed, eyes damp. "I'm sorry, sir." "I know," Malcolm said. "Just keep proving it." As the officer walked away, the ranger turned to him. "You think they'll really change?" Malcolm looked out over the park. "Change isn't sudden. It's a shadow it moves when the light does." A soft wind swept through the trees. Somewhere, a radio played distant news. Reed's initiative expands nationwide federal training mandated across all agencies. Malcolm smiled faintly. "It's working," the ranger said. "No," he replied. "It's starting." He stood, finishing the last sip of his coffee. leaving the empty cup on the bench a quiet symbol of closure. "Remember this," he said, looking back once. "Power isn't what silences others, it's what teaches them to hear." As he walked toward the park's exit, the morning sun broke through the clouds, flooding the path in gold. A child pointed at him. "Mom, who's that?" The mother answered, "That's the man who made them listen." And he smiled, hands in pockets, disappearing into the crowd, one figure among many, indistinguishable yet unforgettable. Because justice, when it's real, doesn't need a stage or applause. It just needs one voice that refuses to shout, and a world finally quiet enough to hear it. It's starting. He stood, finishing the last sip of his coffee, leaving the empty cup on the bench a quiet symbol of closure. "Remember this," he said, looking back once. "Power isn't what silences others, it's what teaches them to hear." As he walked toward the park's exit, the morning sun broke through the clouds, flooding the path in gold. A child pointed at him. "Mom, who's that?" The mother answered, "That's the man who made them listen." He smiled, hands in pockets, disappearing into the crowd, one figure among many, indistinguishable yet unforgettable. Because justice, when it's real, doesn't need a stage or applause. It just needs one voice that refuses to shout, and a world finally quiet enough to hear it.